Hey guys, this is Samuel. I'm going to talk today about an audiobook that I just listened to. I subscribed to Audible a while back using a code to get a free book. I think I wanted to check out that Jordan Peterson book, The 12 Rules or whatever, when it was brand new. And I forgot to unsubscribe from Audible or turn off auto renew, so I had a bunch of credits stacked up. So I decided to get a bunch of audiobooks. And I've kind of replaced my podcasting habits with these audiobooks. And it's opened up my mind a little bit to a lot of these books I've been meaning to get around to reading, but I never did, or I rented them from the library once, and I put a chapter in and decided not to finish it. And one of those books was Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. Now, I didn't pick up this book, but I was lent this book, and just like you often do when you get lent books, you say you're going to read it, but then you keep it in your room, and then eventually you just give it back out of shame because you just never got around to reading it. And that was Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers. And I kind of wish I would have read it earlier. It's a very interesting book. You probably heard about it from people, like if you watch or listen to a lot of business podcasts and stuff. You see, I went to business school in undergrad, so I had a lot of exposure, and I heard about it. It's the 10,000 hour book, which is weird because that's not actually what the book is about. The book is actually about how environments shape things so that people can become outliers and how geniuses aren't that special. Now, I could understand why they think it's the 10,000 hour book, because like most business books, people only read like one or two chapters and then quote it endlessly and don't actually read the entire book. The more business books I read, the more I find out that people don't actually read business books. They get through a couple of it, or they get the synopsis, or they get the cliff notes, and then they think that's the book. The most famous example of these is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anyone who's actually read that book knows that it's a snooze fest and kind of awful, but you'll still see it over and over again on people's book lists. And Outliers is not one of those books, thank goodness. It's actually a really interesting book, but what it's famous for isn't actually what it's about. Now, a couple chapters in, they talk about the 10,000 hour rule, but that actually comes from a study that Gladwell uses to cite some of his claims about environment being the main contributor to the success of highly successful people and outliers. But that's not the bulk of the book. It's just like 1 or 2 chapters into the book, and it's mentioned several times throughout as how did Bill Gates get to where he is? It's because he reached a 10,000 hour limit at a very young age because he had access to computers that most people don't. Now, I think the actual premise of the book is really interesting, that the contributing factors around a outlier's circumstances were what allowed them to become outliers, and that without these significant factors being in place, everything would have fallen apart. But I think it's so I can see where he's coming from, but at the same time, I think it's kind of a false pretense, because a lot of people have advantages, but very few people actually have the grit, the will, or the strength to take advantage of their advantages. A lot of people are handed plenty of things on a silver platter and don't take advantage of it. For example, a lot of people are born in the United States of America or these first world nations, and they don't, follow the proper paths to make sure that they're successful. A lot of people, in America know that if you, stay in high school, you graduate, you go to college, you wait until after you get married to have children, you wait until you're financially stable to have children, and if you do all those things, that you will probably never be, you will be in the middle class, or middle or higher upper class, and you probably will never be in poverty. But, it's easy to say those things, and it's easy to know those things, but actually to act upon it and not to give in to temptations, or not to give in to try to get in quick, easy fixes. It's easy to have advantages, but it's hard to act on them. So even though Bill Gates, he did have significant advantages and everything kind of lined up for him, it still was incumbent on him to act on those advantages. And I think that's a significant thing missing from the book. I think if he included that, just like that one throwaway thing, it would have made the book a lot better. But he didn't. I think a lot of his own views on the Outlier, a lot of the subject material is influenced by politics, which it's a natural thing. Politics naturally influences the way we think. And, me being a more conservative man and being influenced by the idea of some meritocracy, or, just the idea of grit in society and how I think, working is a good thing. Maybe that's influenced myself, whereas Mr. Gladwell, he's more of a liberal man, and he has an idea that, a lot of society structures allowed a lot of these prominent people to be viewed this way. But, he does make a lot of good, fairly consistent points. And I do think it's still a very important read for people because it will humble a lot of people to realize, a lot of us do have advantages in life that we don't see help provide like the lifestyles that we live. But at the same time, I just think he severely underestimates how much is incumbent on the person to yield their advantages in order to become successful. I know lots of people who were in very similar positions that I was in, and they just couldn't yield their advantages. And I see a lot of young people in politics who don't yield their time wisely to make connections, to help themselves, get jobs or, move forward in life. I think there's just a lot that's underestimated on the part of the individual that has to be done in order to become an outlier. I think Bill Gates, that was like one of his main examples. Yes, he had access to a lot of amazing things, but it was the networking and the grit he had of actually going out at 3 o'clock in the morning to the university in order to grind out those programming hours. It was him networking with someone like Paul Allen. It was him when he was here when he was back in Albuquerque, back in my home state. Him making the necessary connections to get known throughout the industry. A lot of that stuff didn't happen by just pure accident. It was upon himself. It was incumbent upon himself. And like the Jewish law firm thing, these people could have been discouraged and not gone into law at all, and they could have chosen a different path. I don't know. A lot of it, I get where he's coming from, and he makes a lot of interesting points. And, it is important to realize that small things that happen in your life can put you on a dramatically different path. I will say, for myself, I got into a car accident the first year of my community college experience or my associate degree experience, that if I did not get into that car accident, I would have never been forced to stay at the college in order, I would never been forced to stay at the college and gotten involved in a lot of the things I got involved in that helped propel myself to learn how to network properly, to learn how to, interact in business properly. And I probably wouldn't have gotten involved in politics. I probably would have stuck to just writing, or I probably would have just been a mediocre writer someone who worked. I probably would have dropped out of college, to be honest, because at that time when I had the car and I wasn't enjoying it, and I was actively looking for a job so I could get out of going to college. It was that car accident that forced me to go to college, that made the embarrassment of me having to be picked up by people I know, or take public transportation places in order to go anywhere, and forced me to stay in one place and really focus on myself, that allowed myself to become a bigger and better person. So little things can happen in life that dramatically change the course of our history and make us refocus ourselves. But I think it's a mistake to say that our environment is 100% responsible for our success. And I think, Gladwell's book just puts a little too much, validity behind that point. I think, like many things in life, success is incredibly complicated. And a lot of it comes down to timing plus effort and environment. But to put all the emphasis on environment like he does in this book is kind of a mistake. I don't know. But I would say it's still a very interesting listen. I had a very good time listening to it. It helped me get through a lot of administrative work and stuff I had to do, like laundry and all that. And I would definitely recommend it. But don't go into this thinking that it's like a deep dive on the 10,000 hour study that he cited. Because that's what I thought when I got into it. I thought, oh, I really want to know how they got to that 10,000 hour number. I want to know how specifically that affects somebody, and because 10,000 hours is like 10 years of doing something that makes somebody an expert. And obviously 10 years of doing something doesn't make anyone an expert unless they know how to properly utilize it. For instance, I've spent 10 years making YouTube videos and I'm still pretty crappy at it. Anyway, hope you all have a great weekend.